Okay.
Recording. Great. So thanks to y'all for coming today. I knew it'd be kind of a small audience because this is kind of a difficult thing we're going through now is kind of trying to come through with like some ideas for our next ultimately a paper. And we've talked about the Delphi method. We've been going through this survey that we did. And so I'll share the screen and I have a few introductory things to go through. And then have hopefully have a little discussion, and then maybe we'll have a few more people by the time we get into the meat of the presentation. So thank you all for joining today. Let me share the screen and make it bigger. And it's hard to believe, January's almost over already. But thank you so much for coming today. Thanks for your participation. If you have any ideas for speakers, just let me know. I wanted to start with the thing that's been in the news a lot is this, DeepSeek, the algorithm that came from China, that's sort of chatbot counterpart to OpenAI's ChatGPT. It's the interesting thing about this is that it is performing quite well on advanced knowledge, and then general knowledge also. And then the thing is that it the cost is much less, as you know, with this algorithm, and possibly takes less computing power to develop. It does a lot more searching. Apparently, after you do the question of the chatbot, rather than building a large model initially, and it is apparently downloadable and very open source. And so it sounds really great, and so I thought I should mention it here. And this is a from an issue of The Economist, and where I kind of first saw about it. I've showed this to Kim, and Kim's also highlighted some articles that it's kind of the Sputnik moment, for the AI industry in the US, because a lot of people didn't see this coming. And obviously I think $1 trillion wiped off the stock market on Monday. It's getting less. Um, but I did wanted to I did find some interesting things about the algorithm, and I know that you can bring it and download it and then train it some more, but apparently the one that was up, apparently they do have some safeguards for the Chinese audience. Apparently, when you ask about the Hong Kong 2019 sort of what happened then, um, you know, it kind of praises the central government, and so I thought that was interesting. And then when you ask about Tiananmen Square, it says that's not under its current scope. I guess if you download the algorithm and then train it some more, maybe you can get it to do that. And then it cannot answer the question about, um, you know, that date then. I think also is since it searches to get more answers, probably maybe it's behind the Great Firewall or whatever. And so maybe it just can't, but maybe when you download it, I know I use Perplexity a lot, and Perplexity now has you can actually choose this DeepSeek already to do your search, but it says hosted in the US. So that's one thing about that. But yeah, it's gonna change a lot of things, obviously. One thing that, people have said is, oh, it's going to decrease energy consumption. And I thought this was an interesting comment from Satya Nadella at Microsoft, saying how there's this Jevons paradox that says that, increased efficiency essentially leads to also uh, increased greater overall consumption. So, even though, you know, the using of this sort of model may be less energy consuming upfront, it may spark more use, and eventually lead to greater, just the same amount of energy consumption, possibly even. And it's not even they're not even sure actually, like they probably did have NVIDIA chips there anyway. So even though NVIDIA took like a $600 billion hit on Monday, some of it's come back. Some people bought the dip, and some people are saying that it may still use just the same amount overall. The other thing is, Jevons paradox is another way to describe a similar phenomenon happens when they correct like traffic problems and add more traffic lanes. And initially people, are happy, and, that sparks more driving. And they say that eventually that leads to the same amount of traffic. So, it'll be interesting. And apparently there's like this war room that Meta has created to kind of look into what's going on with DeepSeek and figure that out because, as you know, Meta has Llama, and so they feel like this is some sort of you know threat to that, or I guess. But I think overall, like Sam Altman, at OpenAI was positive about it, and even Donald Trump was saying, it's a wake up call and it'll spark more competition, which will be good. There apparently have been some cyber attacks against um, uh, the DeepSeek. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know where that's coming from, but yeah. So any comments on that? I know Kim's thought about it a lot more than I have.
Yeah,
Any com
well, Alibaba in China has a competing model that they say is actually much better than DeepSeek, but they aren't letting people use it yet. So until they actually have some independent people using it, that doesn't really mean much. So yeah, that's so the Chinese presence, if that's right, will also include this other, I think it's called Quant, uh, this other Chinese model that is even better.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, that's great. Well, so yeah, let's go on with the survey, and we'll continue with this. So as you all know, and I think you all have been here a lot, so I don't have to reiterate this for y'all, but our aims are an image bank and algorithms, competitions and trials and challenges, which we have the diagraph and the monkey trial ongoing, and then to rethink the innovation timeline. I'm glad that Dr. Zhang is here because we do have also the project going on with donor biopsies and kitware. So that, and hopefully we'll carry that to the larger audience and hopefully develop some algorithms there too. So again, thank you all for coming. 2 weeks ago, this was a great talk by Kim. So I encourage you to, watch the recording if you weren't able to be here. And then, you know, uh, that was excellent. And upcoming meetings, we have a lot. And as I mentioned, in 2 weeks, the University of Florida, Pinaki Sardar's group is two people from there going to present. And so we look forward to them. And Lewis and Anandaya. And you will cancel in 4 weeks for the uh, Cutting Edge of Transplantation Conference. The March 13th meeting will probably be a continuation, kind of what we're doing here. This is kind of a difficult thing to figure out, but I really appreciate everyone's advice. So we'll see how that goes. We'll cancel at the end of March for USCAP. And then April, we have two great presentations. Peter Bohr, he has this new paper on environmentally sustainable performance. That's another thing about the DeepSeek and other algorithms possibly is that, maybe they will help the environment, which I hope they will. And then at the end of April, Alessandro Gambella is going to talk about some steatosis assessment that he did with convolutional neural networks. I put the link in the email, but basically, I'm glad he'll be doing that because that brings in another organ for us to talk about. And so, yeah, I encourage you if you're able to go to Cutting Edge of Transplantation. I know Kim's going to be there, and I think Dr. Levine, Debbie's going to be there. And then at the end of March, the USCAP meeting. So I hope people can go to that too. Um, and this all started this process where with the survey as hopefully we'll be able to do a benchmarking paper eventually. That'll be our next step. But I think we need a lot more work before we do that. And as you know, we did this survey where we asked the digital pathology working group as the experts kind of like some questions that we had asked before. And we're going to carry some of these questions to the general audience and see how that compares and also see how it compares. We asked some of the same questions back in 2019 or so before COVID. So a lot of the things have actually probably changed through the years. For example, thanks to you all who completed the survey, and we hopefully will do a Delphi process where we're gonna, we've already identified the experts, and so part of the survey was to define the problem, and then eventually we'll define some questions, and then I'll go through some rounds and come to some consensus on that. So hopefully, and maybe even, although maybe we won't do this, but I thought one thing we could do even during the digital pathology working group Delphi process was carry some questions to the larger community. And I think that's what we will do with the survey initially even. When we went through some of the survey results 4 weeks ago, people asked, one of the things that maybe we need to make more clear about the survey is, are the questions being asked like just for research like endeavor enterprise, or is it for clinical versus research? And should we favor one or the other, or make it clear that the people should answer the questions just for their clinical endeavor or for their research endeavor? So that brings us to the survey. And so any comments before I go on, like especially on and a lot of you did do the survey, which I really appreciate, is, when we go to the general audience, should we make it more clear, or will that make it kind of like not as, comparable if we, I was thinking, one thought is, oh, we should leave a lot of the questions as close to they were when we asked them to the expert group and see how it compares to the general audience. But we could, when we go to the general audience, make it more clear. Are we talking about research? Are we talking about clinical? What do y'all think about that?
Brad, I have a question. When you're thinking about doing a survey, just a general survey to, an international audience, sometimes, and I think you can do it anyway, sometimes what you can do is your expert group that's going to be actually doing the Delphi. Sometimes if you, and I think you could do it either way, but sometimes you can do the send out the questions that you have in the survey into the general audience, get those answers back for the expert panel, and all these people are in your group, and discuss how those answers will shape or create your Delphi to get the most important thoughts and spectrums on different topics to actually make the Delphi statements. And so that's one way you can do it. I think you could do it the opposite way too, but sometimes you can use the general thing to actually shape better or really formulate those statements to really get at what's needed in the community. Because you'll find out from you'll get your general survey back and people will be all over the board on one question, and you'll say, I need to focus my question directly to that. So I don't know what you think about that, but that was just one thing that popped in my mind.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, and we could probably do the general survey pretty soon if we decide on these questions and get a little bit more feedback. I haven't felt comfortable yet, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. Um, any other comments? Well, yeah, something to say. Okay. Well, let me share the screen again, and I'll start going through the survey questions. I think a lot of these survey questions, probably we shouldn't ask the general audience because you'll see that some of them are just too specific. So sorry, I'm just going to ignore that. So sorry about that. Um, so the first set of questions was demographic questions, and I think these should probably stay. So name and email address, the institution, the department, and the country. That should probably stay. And I actually I could go through an analysis of that and show you uh you know for example, when we had it before, most of the ones we only had 17 respondents here, but yes, I'm getting but we had 17 respondents. And basically before though we had let me just show you so let me see I can show you who we had. Basically, a lot of you responded, which was great. Um, and here we go. Let's see. So, you know, for example, our countries, we had this was our breakdown of the countries. Just show you this real quick. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so obviously, we actually had more from Canada than the US. Well, actually, I need to clean this up. We had several from the Netherlands. This needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But yeah, we had this was kind of the breakdown. So let me go on to the main questions of that. Obviously those are standard questions, so I didn't focus on those results as much, but I focused on these. And for each of these questions, I'll give a basically a breakdown of like what we rated it for each of these questions, like what we rated the questions. So for example, do you have a computerized server that can manage whole slide images from multiple institutions? So that was the question, and I think we should ask that to a general. I mean, that got a pretty high rating, but you know, I think general audience may not have that quite as much. And so I'm sorry, I need to answer just a little. Okay, so yeah, so you have a computerized server that so I think that's a pretty good question we need to ask. This one actually got an even higher rating. If you have the ability to obtain whole slide images, what scanner do you use? And there were a lot of question marks. Obviously uh about 18% of the people did not know, but and some people had multiple scanners they had access to. But it seems like Apereo, 41% said yes on that. So that was the highest. If you look yes on Olympus and Hamamatsu, and then 3D Histech were also some. So those were all so I definitely think we should ask that. Some people pointed out that you know uh, so basically the we'll go to the software next. And if you have a computerized server that can manage host image, what software is used on the server? This got to be very complicated. You know, Several of them had multiple answers. Like Aperio was a high number, a high percent. But and we talked about it last time as some people might be confused with this question, even though it got a high rating, is the software that actually serves the images versus the ones that actually sort of like runs the scanner. So we might need to make this a little bit more clear. Uh, Although, we do say manage the whole slide images, so I think it was pretty clear, but someone said maybe we should ask, maybe we could put in parentheses, not the one that runs the scanner. We're not as much, someone was pointing out, not as much interested in like what's running the scanner is what the packs or what's the software that's actually running and providing access to the images. So if you have a computerized server that can manage whole site images, what image formats are supported? This was a wide range. Obviously, SVS, which is the Apereo, got a high number, high percent, 59%. But there are a variety of others. And I know that there's some scanners. I mean, the experts are going to provide, a lot of very detailed answers. So, I mean, this person, whoever this was probably you may be on here now, but was probably, very well versed in this. And so they were very complete in their answer. But, others, probably were just more simplistic. And although this did, again, get a high over 4 as far as should we include that. So another one we ask is, can the server application de-identify slide information automatically? The majority did say yes. As far as a general audience question, though, maybe this one is not as, I don't know, because for example, if our goal is to establish an image bank, obviously we want to de-identify, but there'll be a lot of different ways people do that. And so a lot of it will need to also happen. I think another step will need to happen at the central site also, just to make sure everything is, doubly, have some redundancy in the de-identification. So for general audience, maybe this is questions too detailed. Are there any thoughts on that?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah,
Hi there.
hi.
Hello, thank you so much. Now, I was thinking maybe this is related partially also to if the digital, pipeline is for clinical research. Maybe if somebody's focused on research only and on like basic science, it's that the identification is not so as much relevant in general, or maybe they don't think about it. So also back to the question about clinical research, maybe that could be put it as the initial part of the question, and say use it more for clinical research or both equal, or more clinical or clinical only, or research only, and based on that can also help in providing more detail about that. Just a thought about it.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, so maybe we do need to have an introduction at the beginning of the survey, like you're saying. And people have said that before, is making it clear this is for a research study, because it is part of the Banff Digital Pathology Working Group. I think our goal is mostly in this survey for research and for the larger community. It is to develop algorithms, but I think our main goal is for research, at least on these initial steps. Is that what everyone else is thinking? Kind of research first and then.
Yes.
No, absolutely. I was thinking that as well.
Okay.
It's just for making it more clear or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So maybe when we have the introductory paragraph, like in the survey, then we can make that more clear. that we're asking the questions related to research. Okay, so next, let's see. Let's see here. Okay. Does the server allow installation of customized and commercial algorithms? So this one got a lower rating as far as does it need to be part of a general audience? I mean, I think we do need to think carefully about like some that at least eliminate some because it is a pretty complicated survey. So maybe this one wouldn't be one that we would want to ask to the general audience because this was a little bit lower on the rating here. So that's something. If you have a computerized server that can manage whole site images, does your software allow the correction and standardization of staining variability? And allow variables in the images from multiple laboratories. Basically this got a low rating. So I don't think this would be a general audience question. Yeah, so I think this is something that's going to happen at a more of a central site, maybe in selected ones of our selected centers within our study, within the Banff Digital Pathology Working Group, but not in the general audience. So I think this one can probably go. And then we get to even more detailed questions. If you have a computerized server that can manage whole slide images, please provide the exact amount of storage available in gigabytes sorry, I cleared those little drawings, terabytes or petabytes, and provide a comment unknown to be determined and so forth. Oh, sorry. So you can see I had a lot of questions here. Like I actually okay, so we had a lot of responses that most people did not know. I bet 58% here, 59%. As you can see, it ranged, as you can see, 1 terabyte all the way up to petabytes. But this didn't get a very high rating as far as being a question for the general audience. So I think it's great data that we collected, but I don't think this would be a general audience question. So if you have a computerized server that can manage whole site images, provide the bandwidth. And so actually 15 people responded that they didn't know. Only 2 answered, and they said up to 1 gigabyte per second. So we didn't get a lot of responses for this question. As you can see, it got a low rating for the general audience. So I don't think we'll ask that one. If you have a computerized server that can manage whole site images, will there be a cost associated with it? The majority said yes. This got a little bit higher rating actually, but I still think probably things that are, I think everyone was rating, basically there was grade inflation. So, 4 is actually kind of low for this rating. So I think this probably wouldn't be a general audience question either. And then, we asked, what's the initial amount that will cost? And then what's the maintenance amount? So this applies to the initial amount. And 2 answered, and they said 1,000 and 25,000 was the other response. And then 17 said they did not know. As you might recall before when we asked this, we actually had like one, collaborator I had who actually helped us set up one for free for that time period. But and I don't think it's still maintained anymore though, because it does cost a lot to maintain also. So we asked about the maintenance. 2 answered around $2,000 per year per terabyte. And then another person said 10,000. I guess that was per year. And then 17 did not know. Again, this got a low rating for the general audience, so we probably shouldn't ask that. So the next one, and this got a high rating. I think these next questions are going to be very interesting. Do you have an existing whole slide image repository of transplant specimens. And so, the majority said yes. And then, which are the specimens that they have? So kidney, heart, pancreas, lung, liver, intestine, and vascularized composite allograft. Obviously kidney was the most. There was one person who answered 10,000. And then, heart had up to 300, pancreas also up to 300, lung up to 500, liver up to 600, and then intestine up to 500. Vascularized composite allograft up to 30. That's interesting. So, and then the median was about 500 for kidney. Well, we should probably look for the mean here. That it was 34 for heart, 25 for pancreas, 50 for lung, about 79 for liver. So seems like it's kidney and then liver as far as if you look at the mean, as far as the strength of our specimens and also the maximum number. And then 144 for intestine. That's interesting. And so that that's a good number too. So yeah, and the rating on this was 4.21. So we kind of said about 4, spin our cutoff for questions that we should ask for the general audience. So maybe I think this one, and it could be interesting to know how many specimens are out there. And that would, help us know, if there's going to be an effort, in the general audience also to contribute specimens, just to know what the, overall, draw will be. And we asked this question to a general audience before, and so it'll be interesting to see if this number has grown in the 4 or 5 years since we asked it before. And that was before COVID, as I mentioned before. So it'll be interesting. We did ask about the image format. That actually got a high rating. So maybe we should keep that, although it gets a little bit messy. And I do have the option of making it, multiple choice, and then having a free text underneath that where if the choice is not available, then they can, basically they can write something in, I think. Maybe I should do that for this question, drawing on this data, basically that SVS, the Apereo format's the largest, and then maybe provide some of the other choices here. And I haven't fully cleaned up that responses here yet, but I wanted to see all those responses. So maybe I do need to change the format of this one a little bit to make the data a little bit more palatable and easier to process in the future. Because if we do get a lot more in the general audience survey, then it'll be hard to clean that up. Any comments? Okay. And then, we asked about the resolution, and we got a wide range of responses. You can just read those here. I didn't really, this didn't get a high rating, so maybe not. And this is actually something we added for this survey. We didn't ask this before, I don't believe. So I don't think we should ask this for the general audience. We did ask about staining types. This was actually a multiple choice. This got a high rating, so maybe we should keep it. You do tend to get some, the way I had this worked is that it was multiple choice, but it also allowed, people to write stuff in, and that's where you're getting these questions here. It does, the nice thing about this is that it does, let me just stop the share here and I'll show you the, let me just share again. I'll show you what you may remember what it looked like, but basically, this is the way it kind of looked. It kind of provided a way to for people to provide an other comment there. And so that's how that worked. And I think maybe we should do that for the image format also, just so that we get more usable data for that question. Let me stop the share and I'll go back to the survey. And go here. Okay, so here. Let's see. Okay. So that's the staining types. Okay, so what I did for these questions, since they were text like response, I used Wolfram Mathematica to make a word cloud of the responses. So the first one was to provide a comment on the repository, and this did get a high rating, so maybe we should allow a general audience to provide a comment. And we can come up with other ways other than just word cloud to, mine the data you get on, text responses. But, here are some of the text, and I've just kind of tried to summarize that here. But basically they mentioned, some of the case breakdown, they have, donor recipient, cross-section of cases, but enriched for certain pathologies. They do. Some people mention the difficulties in sharing. Special stains are selective and not available for every case. But some have are using theirs daily diagnostically, so they're continuously growing. So, I think that highlights this is a very strong, potential thing. This got a high rating also about the challenges that will be confronted. And what agreements are needed for the collaboration. And obviously MTA, DTA came up high here. Several people mentioned that. Someone mentioned, I think there was at one point they said a legal minefield. So it is tough, but hopefully we can work it out eventually, at least for a limited basis. But I think collecting this data will be helpful, and maybe we should keep this question just as is, because it did get a high rating. Would it be possible to share metadata? Not everyone responded, but yes was the most common word. So that's reassuring. But a lot of people did say, they'll have to ask leadership or de-identify. Agreements will be needed. That was the second most common word. So it's going to be tough. So as a preparation, what are the major problems? So this is the one about the challenges. This got a high rating also. Data, that's not a very helpful most common word, but it was the most common word. And then software, it was sort of the next most common. People pointed out, they have to work with their IT teams, and so that can be tough. So the context of use, that's kind of about clinical versus research. So maybe, if we put an introduction saying, this is for research, then that'll make it more, make it more useful. Reproducibility and benchmarks. I'm very interested in trying with our Delphi, not necessarily with a general audience, but and I'm not sure if this was me, I can't remember, but as the metrics, trying to make the metrics that people are reporting in papers a little bit more uniform, and figuring out what are the best metrics, like, accuracy or Dice coefficient, or obviously it depends on the type of paper you're writing. But or ROC curves, trying to come up with best practices for that. And I think that's something the working group could work on in the future. Um, infrastructure was thing, legal and ethical requirements, obviously. This was a long response, and Alessandro actually, so I actually blew up this last one because I know it's small. Um, uh, so so this person pointed out that they would like to uh, and suggested that we add something about the use of data for commercial purposes, which is becoming an issue. Um, so, and what kinds of AI would people like to use, or what other purposes do they see for the collected data? Which metadata would be absolutely necessary, and which would be nice to have? So that was an interesting comment and a lot of food for thought. And then the last one was, do you have additional suggestions for questions to the general audience? And someone added, and actually I need to add that for more of the questions. I need to add unknown and not just yes or no. For some of them they were able to, click question mark, but yeah, I need to make it more clear that they can answer unknown. And then resources, obviously is a big thing. Clone from the C4D antibody. I think for the general audience I mean, that's very helpful, but that might be tough and a little bit too detailed. And I know another working group did work on C4D in the past, or several actually. I participated in one, and so some of that data has been collected. But I mean, that is an important point. And then we can ask, this was an interesting comment, we can ask for them to be explicit about the involvement that the institution or PI would like to have and adjust communication accordingly. uh, and basically active collaboration and involvement with the working group. And a network of institution or PIs with availability that can be contacted based on their specific aim or project. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think, we need to create more communication amongst our working group. And I think that's a great thing that the working group can be involved in. If the approach is not appropriate, we can maybe apply it to a specific project. Once a project's proposed, the working group ask the components what type of support. That's a good too. Yeah, I think this survey could apply to all the organs, but maybe when we identify sort of like a pet project, which we have the digraph and we have the kitware project, maybe we can have another survey that's more specific, and in some ways that might make it easier to have another survey. But I think we need a lot of this we can repeat with a general survey. And as Dr. Levine said, as Debbie said, that can guide our Delphi process. And then there was this overall comment. Okay, one comment was, I'm not clear why we should ask questions about a number of slides in the transplant repository based on to guide the Delphi process. So I think, we asked it in the prior survey, and so I think it could be interesting, and it did get a high rating overall. So I think we'll continue that, but I see why someone would say that for the Delphi, maybe that's not as a big a thing. And someone made a comment, as a clinician, didn't know the answers to most of the questions, and that's certainly okay. A lot of our working group, even the pathologists, didn't know the answer to a lot of the questions. I think some of those are the questions we should drop for the general survey. And I think actually Alessandro made these two comments, which I had actually blown up from his email before. So, and I kind of highlighted some things. So explicit or type of involvement the institution or PI would like to have. And and so we kind of talked about that a little bit more. Use more multiple choice questions. So I'll aim to do that, especially for the general audience, to make this as easy as possible for the general audience. Regarding the questions about the specimen type, we want to ask how many biopsies for native kidney and liver. That's a really great comment. And I think maybe that kind of is something we should do on one of those pet projects. I think for this general survey, kind of keeping it a little bit general also will help get data that's also comparable to our prior survey. So again, thank you all for participating. And I welcome any ideas. I think what I'll do next, we have in 2 weeks we have a presentation, and then in 4 weeks we have another working session. And so what I'll aim to do, and I know we're going really slow, but hopefully we'll eventually have a nice paper that comes from this, is I think in 4 weeks I'll have the survey draft for the general audience based on what we've gone through before here. And then maybe get your final thoughts on that before we send it out to Kim has access to some listservs, and I think we can even put it on Twitter and stuff. But any comments before on that process? Yes, Mazi. Yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah.
Of course, I'm gonna ask a question that is based on the fact that I have a lot of enthusiasm, but a learner in this space. I'm catching up with all the information that is out there. So excuse me if my question is a little bit ignorant. I looked at the survey individual questions as trees, but I'm having a hard time to see the whole forest. Is the goal ideally is to have an image bank that facilitates communication with everybody to come together and do research, and then we are trying to build the infrastructure so you're going to set the standards. This is how to participate. Are you envisioning a distributed data system model where everybody has their own computerized server and then connecting to each other? Are we allowing for peer-to-peer networks? Like, what does it look like? What does success look like? And then maybe based on that, I can a little bit understand what are because a lot of these questions, I need to talk to my IT people to be able to fully answer the questions.
That's true. That's a great question. I mean, and I think you hit on a really important point is what's the goal? I think one of the things we're trying to do now is figure out what is out there and maybe kind of try to get an estimate of how much it would cost. I think one Banff image bank would be awesome, that's centrally hosted. I think distributed is also another model, definitely. But I think one of the aims of this is what is out there, and maybe try to get an estimate of what's the cost going to be to establish this. What are the ethical and legal and the MTAs and the data transfer agreements you're going to need to do that, and so I think we're aiming for one, but distribute is definitely something also. So I think, and we have to keep it kind of simple. What you're asking is awesome, and we do need to figure that out more. But I think this general audience survey needs to be a little bit simple, and then maybe we can get more data, and then maybe this will be something we can use, as Dr. Levine said, use this data to guide our Delphi to actually figure out what's the best approach, like you're asking.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well,
Okay.
in 4 weeks, yeah, we'll present the draft in 4 weeks and then get more comments. And I'll see you all then in 2 weeks when we have a special presentation from Sam's group. So look forward to it, and you all take care.
Great. Thank
Thanks
you
a
all.
lot. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.